Welcome back to the Global Business Report here on Horizon. We're about to have a very important conversation on food here, looking at the 6-month performance, half year 2023 of BOA Foods. There it is. Revenue, 90% climb there, 320 billion. The gross profit up by 155%, 132 billion. Operating profit, backing at a number of course, 147% climb to 115 billion. Pre-tax profit, 109 billion. Profit after tax, 95 billion. Let's talk food. We have engineer Ayodele Abioye, who is the managing director of BOA Foods. Sir, it's good to have you again. It's been a long time since we had you last in this studio. So
good to be back.
Let's get into it. This is such a critical sector. What was it? What were your revenue drivers? Was it sugar, pasta? What was behind the big the numbers we saw there? The climbing revenue.
Clearly, as we set out in the year, our focus was purely on our strategic initiatives for the year.
Yeah.
And one of the key elements there is commercializing our expansions.
Okay.
If you know, we've talked about expanding across all our 5 businesses. So we started commercializing our 5 business, our expansion drives, crystallizing them into demand fulfillments primarily. And of course, the key driver to this number you see is actually the volume growth. We've grown the volume about 36% now, almost 40% as it were. And growth has been recorded across all the sectors. Important also to add that, yes, the new kid on the block, which is also our rice mill, also came on board in the half year. And of course, in second year, we look forward to making that more robust in terms of contribution to revenue. So, by and large, you're right, strong performance result, as it were, with profit, or rather revenue at 90% growth.
Yeah.
And of course, profit after tax at 95 billion thereabout, as it were.
Yeah. Your costs, we have your costs up there. I mean, this is a big jump. Your cost of sales, 61% growth to... Is processing food costly? Talk to us about that. What was the drivers there for your cost of sales?
So it's pretty clear. Like every other business, you are not immune to variations and the challenges of the headwinds, which directly affects input costs, raw material, energy. And of course, recently too, with the subsidy issues, you have to look after your employees. So cost of employee cost is also going up because we need to catch up with the living wages or living allowance, as it were, that is emerging. So that is expected.
Yeah.
Of course, I haven't talked about the issue of the economic climate situations in terms of FX also that has also impacted, which of course will affect your raw material input. Even if the global prices of your raw material stabilizes, you need FX to buy them.
Yeah.
And of course, FX is coming at a cost. And all of that local headwinds and everything pulled together will obviously impact a lot of this. But also not to forget the fact that as you grow in terms of numbers, you also need to spend more in terms of cost of input, as well as, of course, sales and distribution, which I believe will also see
in fact, you have preempted it. There it is. 200% climb in selling and distribution. Your administrative cost 164%. So what was it? Is it logistics or what?
Okay, so the interesting part with total supply chain, as it were, is that when you expand your on-site production facility, you need to tie that together with your inbound supply chain as well as your outbound supply chain, which is and all of that needs to be orchestrated, work together, and in doing that, you need to spend some money.
Yeah.
So on the outbound side, of course, fulfill customer need, you need to consider how you move these goods. So you need to bring in extra logistics support, transportation, as it were, and also build warehouse or engage extra warehouses, which also helps you to accommodate these products so that you can also be close to the customers market, as it were. So all of this comes naturally, expectedly, that we must have these increases, which obviously over time, again, will pay off.
Would it help if we had, rail? Because everything moves by road. Would you have a more diverse transport network? Would that help maybe reduce your costs?
Sincerely, yes, I must say, because rail basically it's a bulk transportation. So you are able to drop down the cost per unit if you have a rail system. I'm happy that government is looking into that area. All that needs to be done is accelerate the process. I remember growing up in those days, everything could move. In fact, we used to have a special rail line they call it goods train.
Right.
In those days, you just see, not passenger train, goods train.
Yeah.
Everything you see in there are goods. From the farm, livestock, just name it. It's all good strain and all of that,
Okay.
So I'm sure if that will come back at some point in our lifetime, and of course, very soon, pretty soon, we hope.
I want to ask about your assets. We saw quite a growth in your total assets. There it is. Yeah, 24% growth, 758 billion. Is that part of the expansion that you're talking about?
Obviously, yes.
Yeah.
So as all of these crystallizes, obviously you begin to see these numbers come up there. And of course, these are assets we continue to use to deploy in terms of expanding and driving our growth.
Yeah.
As it were. So that change is basically the elements of those that are completed that are already brought into the books as well.
Well, what are your finance costs? I mean, I think is it interest rates that you've had to, borrowing costs? Have those also materialized as well?
Yes, those are part of it. We take them in as soon as it arrives, and of course, where we have bits and bits of exposures, we do also accommodate them in terms of the financial costs. So that is basically what we book in there. And also, of course, bits and bits of elements of where we have exposures, we also make sure we provide for them.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to get to the FX matter. Because we pulled these quotes from the results where you're saying, about the foreign exchange that you're expecting the impact. Okay. So here's the quote there. So from the results, it says, whilst the impact of foreign exchange loss in H1 has not been significant due to our supply chain hedging strategy, we anticipate a material effect in H2, which will be adequately provisioned for. So talk to us about that. What?
Okay. So what this simply means from a supply chain understanding is simply that by the time the pronouncement for the unification of exchange has come, we've already covered our inventories. We have inventories that cover us for the half year. And of course, this is also because you plan much, much ahead. Already, smart companies are already planning for 2024 because we're already in half year. So you don't plan when the time comes. You plan much, much ahead of that. So we have inventories that already cover that. That's not to say that we didn't take in the element of the exposures. We did. And of course, those are on our top lines, as you can see. We do take that in. The rest of the year, we're going to obviously have more, and of course we will also accommodate that in all our cost lines as well, because it's just purely largely material input costs that we are affected in this case, and we will accommodate that, we'll adjust for it, and then make sure we have. But what is very important to say is also that the growth platform is quite strong. It's quite encouraging, and we are very optimistic that our brand will still sustain a very decent and attractive growth by the end of the year, irrespective of the amount of additional losses that we need to take in.
Great stuff. Now, so the earnings are good. You did well, double-digit growth. You are in food, so we have to talk about that. I don't want to pull you into any political discussions here, but you know what's been going on around the country. Food palliatives, cost of living going up. You are in the food business, so I don't even want to share your thoughts on how there's a food crisis. The president's, called a food emergency ahead. So how do we get, what do we do here? What do we do? How do we address this food crisis and implement food palliatives? How do you think it will work?
Fortunately for us, we are all human. We need food.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of whatever we do, food is number one. And like you did said, the government recently pronounced a state of emergency on food security, as it were. And that's a very good pronouncement for us. For us, as a brand, Boa brand, I will say, you recall that our chairman, Abdusamad Rabiu, is a very strong promoter of food security.
Indeed, he is.
And that's one of the key elements of also the brand, as it were, to mention. So, talking about palliatives and extending palliatives to food, it's a very important topic that I think we are very interested to play in. But what I think is very important to talk about here is the fact that we need to look at the food system holistically. Why am I saying this is because if you provide palliative on one end of the system and you do not consider the other end, it goes away, it withers away and does not actually get to the common man. So what we should look at is look at the food system. It starts with the production, it starts with the processing, distribution, and of course the consumption. Okay. At the production side, of course, agriculture is being looked after. Recently, the government also pronounced, Mr. President actually did mention in his broadcast, focusing on 150,000 hectares of land for rice and
cassava,
all of that.
all these other things.
I tell you sincerely, if that is done and you multiply it, it's about 1.6 million metric tons of paddy rice, which will be very, very useful as an input for most of us that are in the rice milling business, to be honest, go a long way in addition to other efforts, as it were. So I think the palliatives needs to be extended across the entire food system. Why is this? Because for us as manufacturing in particular, if we get some palliative, we're able to pass down the costs in terms of abating the cost of goods such that we can also ensure that our consumers and the end consumer at the end of the day is able to have an affordable price, competitive on their table. Okay, so I think this is where it is critical.
It's critical. Well, you see, when one looks at your costs on your financials and sees the growth and the driving, that, I mean, you are illustrating how expensive it is to produce food in the country. So obviously the government is going to face those challenges as well if they're trying to produce more food across the country to feed the nation. So isn't it critical that we accept and acknowledge the challenges in producing food in Nigeria? That's essentially what I'm asking, just using your financials as an example.
Yeah. So we should. And then also ask ourselves, in which areas do we have control over?
Right.
So for instance, if you look at gas energy, it's a local product. And I'm sure one of the things that the experts talk about is that we have this at our back end. Shouldn't we enjoy the benefit of having it at our back end? So if you look at gas energy, how can we make sure gas energy is democratized, is liberalized, and comes at a lower price to industries, for instance, such that we're able also to pass those costs down the line, down the value chain.
What power? Well, it's the power problem.
Exactly, that's it. So gas energy actually relates to power. Industries today are largely running on
generators
and all of that. Most of us that are in the big industry, in big manufacturing, I would say, we're using gas energy, as it were. The other MSMEs are probably relying more on diesel, which is more expensive than gas, as it were. And then, of course, our grid also, depending on where you are, neither here nor there. And I think if we are able to do something across all of it, which is why I'm saying manufacturing palliatives, very important. Government have done some. I think more needs to be done. Critical thing is to focus the fact that look at the entire food system, apply the palliative across whatever is needed to ensure that the price benefit gets to the end user. To the end users.
Engineer Ayodele Abioye, it's always great talking to you. Managing Director, Boa Foods. Great result. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rotus. Good to see you.
You're watching the Global Business Report here on Arise News. We'll have more after the break.